best entertainment on the earth. Tune in for Comics with Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch, always looking to figure out how to get more comics into the hands of more people, how to lower the prices. So this question kind of hits at the heart of both of them. It says, hey Perch, I've been following your channel for quite a while. Over the past 4 years, I'm sorry, by the way. Over the past 4 years or so, Marvel has been reprinting some of their key issues for $1 under the True Believers line that DC followed with a revival of their dollar comics. I've seen many of those at my LCS, even up to this point. Are the sales figures for those consistently decent? What do you think of a possibility for either of the big two to greenlight a comic series for the price of $1? Would that be possible in the current state of the comic industry? Well, certainly it would be possible. The challenge is, well, so first off, you asked, how are the True Believers of dollar comics doing? And the answer is they're doing okay, but they're not doing great. They're not doing, like amazing to the point that you'd want to really double or triple down on that line. Dan Didio kind of famously said that, hey, some of the reprints, some of those issues were outselling some of his current comics. But that was a bit of that statement had some caveats to it, and ones that both helped and hurt Didio. Many people seized on that to say, hey, the old comics are clearly more popular than the new comics, so screw these new comics, the old stuff rules. And I mean, sure, but the other thing that was going on is the True Believers line, the dollar comic line, they were reprinting some of the best comics. They weren't reprinting everything. They weren't reprinting, the storylines that you've forgotten about by these characters. They were reprinting things that, by and large, were good hooks to get people into comics. And so it makes sense that they were selling more. And at that, lower price point, greatest hits type material, yeah, I mean, that's a good combo. That's going to sell well, and it's a good idea. But the problems with it were kind of, there were three big ones. The first is that a lot of the comics they were reprinting have already been reprinted before. So great, you got the True Believers line, but many of those comics had already been in shops and have been reprinted in many different formats. So if we're talking about a ploy, kind of a gimmick to get more people into comics, they already had a lot of those bases covered. So it's not like they really exposed people to something they hadn't already seen. In fact, in many cases, the True Believer books felt, they were good stock for a comic book to have on hand. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm looking for something cheap to kind of get me into Spider-Man. Hey, here you go. Here's a comic that will do that. Great. But, it doesn't sustain the readership. It's tough when you have somebody who's like, here's a True Believers comic or a dollar comic from, 15, 20 years ago for some hit stories. And the person's like, wow, I read through this and I'm hooked. I love it. Now what? Give me a comic now. It's like, well, here you go. Here's Spider-Man $3.99, and it's actually Ben Reilly who's in the suit instead of Peter, and Ben Reilly's kind of losing his mind, and MJ's they're starting to date again though. And the person's like, well, wait a second, the True Believer comic I just read had the two of them getting married. What do you mean they're starting to date again? They got divorced? It's like, no, the memory got erased by the devil. Then they were trying to save Aunt May's life. It's like, wait, what? That's the problem. Is I think the True Believer line, it reprinted a lot of issues that are already in the market, and then it didn't provide a really good, way to go further. Once you got hooked, where do you go from there? Unfortunately, where you go from there is somewhat confusing and very expensive. So when you're kind of getting these comics, and it's like, all right, you hooked me with these dollar books, and now I'm paying $4.99 for something. And it's shipping weekly. Jesus, I mean. That's the challenge you've got. And so I think that it's a good idea. The idea is solid. It just needs a little bit of tweaking. And if anything, it needs to do a lot more. So here's this crazy idea. What if the comic books, basically, they came out at their current price, their $3.99, $4.99 price, too expensive. But let's just say we're not going to touch that. Let's say the rules of the game here are we can't mess with the new stuff. We can't mess with the current comics. We have to do something, we can't mess with the current work. It can only be additive, our idea. Okay, so what if, rather than take anything away, what if 1 year after the comic book was out in the market at the $2.99 or the $3.99, $4.99 price point, what if 1 year or even 2 years later, the comic book was made immediately available for $1? It's a reprint, but it's $1. How many people would just wait How many people would say, you know what, I'm not going to get into, I'm not going to read the current comics at their current price point. I'm just going to hang out for 2 years and pay the dollar. The interesting thing is, because I've heard this idea discussed before, and the pushback was always, well, everybody will just wait and it will kill the current comic industry because people just stop buying comics and go ahead and wait, 2 years and get it cheaper. But that doesn't line up with the behavior that we see from the people currently buying comics. The Wednesday Warriors are very much, in the mentality of wanting to go to the store to get the newest thing. They show up on Wednesday because they don't want to wait until Thursday. So now you're telling me those people, if you gave them a price break, would wait 2 years? I don't think so. Many people will pay a premium to get it first. And here's an idea where, yeah, you can get it first, and you can pay more, and you get the first edition collectors. If you're a collector, if you are a speculator, if you're somebody who's very much into comics and you're already acclimated to that price point, maybe it's still too high and you're grumbling about that, but still, you're going to pay it because you need to know what's going on first. You need to know what's going on when it comes out. I think the 2 years later, people who would buy it for $1, I think, is a new audience. And I think that's a more attractive new audience and a more likely new audience, and say, hey, what if we made all the characters younger, non-white, and gay? That will get the new audience. To me, that's a more risky proposition. I think if you're able to go out and say, look, 2 years later, you get the second printing, and it's obviously not going to be as collectible, but it's going to be cheap. You might even be able to go under $1. And it's you're not paying anything because you're not soliciting any new work. You don't have to go and pay the creators a second time. You don't have to do, you're just printing them. And you print them on cheaper newsprint paper. And you're like, here's how you can read the comics later, cheaper. I think that might work. I think that actually might be interesting. And I absolutely don't think it would alter or change or hurt the current comic buying audience at all. And I think it then solves the problem that the True Believers and the dollar comics stuff got into, which is, there was nowhere to go from there. Once you bought it, hey, it's like, here's a great, it's like a greatest hits. But if you have a band that you really love and you buy the greatest hits album, invariably what you're going to do is you're going to go buy the regular albums, the solo albums. You're going to go onto iTunes. You're going to say buy all. I don't know if this is out in all markets. I know that Apple is experimenting with it, where now if you're buying music and it detects that you like a certain band because it's looking at your plays. I got this offer. I was listening to a lot of the Beatles, and I don't know. I'm not the hugest Beatles fan, but I mean, you can't complain about the Beatles. But anyway, I was listening. I had bought one of the greatest hits albums, and I have several of the others, but I was listening to the greatest hits one, and it came up on my iPhone with a message of, you've been listening to this for $180. You could just have them all, have all the albums and everything they've ever done. It was basically giving me an offer to give me everything. And I think that's the kind of stuff where, with the True Believers people, once they're hooked on a popular story, they do want to just get it all. They do want to then dive into the comics. And the problem is there's no easy bridge to do it. I think, an idea where you're able to make money a second time on some of these books is a pretty decent idea. I also think that if you get the volume up, so here's what will happen. If you can get a new group of people who are willing to, get into comics for $1, they're interested in buying that. They'll come on board. Several of them will get excited about the comic. And if you're smart about it, if Marvel is smart, they'll reprint the books. They'll put like a little ad in saying, hey, here's what's coming up in the next, 40, 50 issues. When, we finally get to it, you're going to see all this kind of stuff. But if you want to, race down to your local comic store and you can see it now, at the premium price. You can do it now. There will be, plenty of people of this new audience who will just keep paying the $1. But there will be others who are like, I can't wait. 2-3 years to get all these comics. So I'm just, screw it. I'm going to a comic store. I'm going to pay, $80 and I'm going to get caught up and I'm going to stay there. I think the psychology is really smart. And finally, if you've got something for $1 like that, you do it with your main titles, then that is something, and it's on newsprint and everything. It's a more disposable product. That's something that you can distribute more places. You can take that to the gas stations. You can take it to the supermarkets. You can take it all over the place. It wouldn't violate the agreement you have with the LCSs. It wouldn't violate any of that. And it would, allow you to go bigger in the distribution. So I think they should certainly keep going with True Believers and keep going with Dollar Comics. I think they're smart. I think they need to get out of just always reprinting the greatest hits and instead reprinting more runs and have this be a regular series. Have it be something you can sign up for and stop it. Maybe stop the whole model of hey, here's a very special issue, and instead it's hey, here's the comic from 2018, and we're just making more money off it. And put it this way, I'll throw this out there as well. There's a decent amount of grumbling at times at the publisher that they don't have the ability to make money off the back issue market. That goes to the comic store and they think they deserve a piece of it. Now, I don't think they do deserve a piece of it all. I think it's a churlish kind of silly comment for them to make. The back issue stock is going up in price. It's like an investment. The comic shops do not have returnability. So, I mean, what are you talking about? They took the risk, and if they can make some upside on the comic, that's on them. You don't deserve any of that. However, this approach of actually putting the comics back into circulation a couple of years later, it does give every single publisher the option to double dip a little bit on some of these books. It gives them the ability to bundle them in a really clever way to just say, hey, here's the issue 1 through 12 in a shrink wrap pack that we can sell at Walmart. You might say, how is that different from a trade? Well, it's cheaper than doing a trade, particularly if you're putting on newsprint and other things. It also encourages buying monthly comics because when you get 12 books in a little shrink wrap package, you're getting 12 monthly books. So it's reminding whoever's buying that of your core business model, which is monthly floppy comics. So anyway, I like the program. I think they can do a lot more with it. And the reality is, if they are able to increase distribution, if they are able to get a lot more readers into it, if they are able to get people buying up, then, they never would, but the volume increase and some of the predictability of the line means they could take that $3.99, $4.99 book, they might even be able to lower the price on it down. If you're doing more volume and you understand where your margins and where your profit can be, you could take that $3.99 book and you can comfortably bring it down to $2.99 and not, lose anything because you've driven more volume into your system. It's overall more positive for the market. So I think there's a lot of things you can do, but thanks for bringing that up. I think it's a good program. I just think they need to do a lot more of it. And I think rather than have it be a very special issue of the Avengers or of Batman, they ought to make it where this is actually how we treat our line. This is how we do it. I think that would be clever. Anyway, let me know what you think of these comics. Have you ever bought them? What do you think of them? Do you think they're helpful to the comic industry? Be curious your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.